participation here. We saw a late email regarding, that's the call to order, I will say, the approval of minutes. We saw a note from George around that. George, you just want to summarize that and then we can go to approving the minutes from last month's meeting?
Yeah, sure, by all means. I just asked Deb to make a small change to section 5, paragraph 7, regarding my comments in February. Just square them away a bit, and drop a concern, what was referenced as a concern regarding conservation design, because I don't have any concerns about conservation design.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for your scrutiny of those minutes. Does anybody else have any comments on the minutes from last month? Hear a motion to approve the minutes from the February meeting?
I'll move the approve
As
the
amended?
February 16th minutes as amended.
Second.
As amended? Okay, all in favor? Aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let me make comments on those before we go on to the 3 on the agenda. So R1 development density was part of last month's meeting, and it would have been part of this month's meeting, but staff needs just a little bit more time to get ready for that continued discussion. So that's why it's not on tonight's agenda. And of note also from last month, the accessory solar matters that we've been talking about. The draft there is with the Board of Supervisors, and a public hearing is, in the works or being scheduled. So things from last month that are moving along, it's sometimes easy to lose track of where those things are if they don't come up to the next agenda. So I wanted to point those out. Before we move on to approval of the agenda, we have a couple of folks from the public here, or guests, shall we say, and we do know, I think, why many of you are here, but if there's things that are not on the agenda that guests would like to comment on before we move into the approval of the agenda, this is your chance. Okay, hearing no comments from guests. Before we actually call for a motion to approve the agenda, I wanted to put in a request that because we do have a couple of guests here, I'd like to change, and Amy consulted with me on this, to change the agenda to move Planning Commission business item C around the rural residential zoning update to our first discussion item tonight. So we'll make that point A. I'd like to make that point A, and then the amendments to the sewage management program would be point B, and the official map would be point C. So with that shift in ordering things to value their time and get that part of it moved along, can I hear a motion to approve the agenda with that amendment? Great, thank you, Bob. Second?
I second that.
Awesome. Those in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
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 Aye, thank you. So we move on to Planning Commission business, and we'll shift this proposed ordinance 348 rural zoning update to point A. And as is noted in the agenda, we have a working meeting with the Board of Supervisors scheduled for next Wednesday, 9 days from now. They have some, they'd like to hear from the Planning Commission. I think it's an opportunity for us to describe sort of our rationale on that. And there are some township residents who are also interested in this proposal. And so there's a work session scheduled next week. Those of you who are here specifically for this agenda item, you're welcome to make comment here in a minute, but let me just say that we are having a work session with the Board of Supervisors in 9 days, and that would be the opportunity for you to once efficiently share your concerns in detail. If you want to, in brief, summarize, the issues that you have in mind, that's okay. But if you just want to stand down until next Wednesday, that's fine too. So that's kind of what's up with moving this up. Staff, are there any comments that you have or commission members that you have before we ask the public, the guests, to share any comments if they have them?
So I'll just comment briefly on what happened at the board meeting last Monday. Mr. Yoakum is here. He owns a piece of property, Nittany Meadow Farms, off of 322, and that property is proposed to be rezoned rural residential under the new proposed ordinance. Mr. Immel is on the call. Mr. Immel is interested in purchasing Mr. Yoakum's farm and would like to put a goat farm or do goat farming on that land. So a lot of the discussion at the board meeting was held around if Mr. Immel could still farm under rural residential, which he actually could do. From the discussions we had with him after the meeting, he can probably do 2/3 of what he wants to do under the rural residential. The Board of Supervisors also had questions about agritainment. I've heard from a couple of them after the meeting saying they didn't really understand what agritainment was. There are also a couple of them aren't sure that maybe that's a good fit for the township. And then we did some research and have been doing some more research kind of into the history of how that got sewer out there, when that got sewer out there, and some other things. So we really want to save the bulk of the discussion because there's also questions about conservation design. Supervisor Graham was a little confused about the yield planning, so we want to go through that with them as well. We want to save the discussion really for that joint work session because we want to focus on, we're looking like an hour and a half session with them, focusing on their questions, because where we are in this process, the way the MPC is written, it says that this has to go to the CRPC to be reviewed at least 30 days prior to the board being able to act on it. We also have to post the areas generally, since it is a comprehensive rezoning, it's a large area. And we may have to send letters out to property owners. We're waiting to find out from the solicitor if that has to happen. So there's this whole process we have to follow. We do have Mr. Songer keeps emailing us every month because he's waiting for this to pass because he has some plans and he needs the new zoning to be in place to do the new plans. So we have people that are waiting for the zoning to pass. We have a process we have to follow, and we kind of don't want this to drag on through the summer if possible, because we've been working on this for 7 years now. So we're hoping if we have that work session, I did email the supervisors Friday and asked them to send me any specific questions they had outside of what they had talked about at their meeting. And we're hoping if we have that session next Wednesday, that will be very productive and we can resolve. Certainly the supervisors are the decision makers of the township, not staff and not the planning commission, but certainly they can resolve the issues surrounding the Yoakum property and if that'll be rezoned to rural residential or if it'll stay ag, and we can kind of all maybe get on the same page and understand why we did what we did. So that's why we didn't want to have a lot of discussion tonight, because that's going to be the focus of the meeting on the 24th. It's just on rural residential. Or not just on ag, the ag or the rural zoning, not rural residential, the rural rezoning.
Right. Any other staff or comments or planning commission members, questions or comments on this?
So I have a question. So it sounds like that the workshop was prompted a little bit by just what agritainment is and also by this specific property. Does that sound
Yes,
somewhat accurate?
agritainment, this property, and then also conservation design, because I'm not sure again, it's a 50-page ordinance, so I don't know how in depth they got into it before their meeting Monday, but I'm not sure some of them quite grasp what we're doing with the yield planning.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not an easy thing to kind of grasp in a quick flyby.
Right.
Okay, I was just going to ask, could you just define a little bit better about which property this is in question that could be zoned ag instead of rural residential?
So it is Nittany Meadow Farms, which is off of Route 322. It's adjacent to Galen Dreibelbiss's farm, and
Okay.
it's basically across from Laurel Hills. Laurel Hills.
Okay.
And I really don't want to go too in depth into this evening.
No, that I understand that. So that's right on the edge. And I mean, to me, when I look at the rural residential district, it's primarily large lot residences. it's not primarily ag.
Yes,
And,
so.
and I could see where this one could go either way, this particular property.
Right, and so this property, prior to Mr. Yocum purchasing the property, it was the subject of an open space rural clustering subdivision. And that it has 2 residential lots and an open space lot. And under our regulations currently, the residential lots actually can't be farmed, only the open space lot can be farmed. And then additionally, it has access to public sewer. It's inside the sewer service area. So that's why the thinking was to put this in with the rural residential, because you can still farm on that open space lot, but you do have 2 lots that were designated for residential uses when that subdivision was done, which was prior to Mr. Yocum buying the property. I believe you bought the property in 2006, Mr. Yocum.
2003.
2003. Sorry.
Okay. All right, but they could also do all those things if it was zoned ag as well.
The things they pick up that they can't do under rural residential would be the agritainment uses. And if you
Right.
remember, the discussion we had about the agritainment was we didn't really want corn mazes and more intensive uses in the middle of Aspen Heights or in the middle of Rocky Farm, which could happen if you have the open space lot there and someone wants to farm it, and you say in rural residential they could do agritainment. So we limited agritainment to the agricultural zone, and it had to be off of an arterial street.
Right, and that makes total sense to me. In fact, I don't think it makes any sense to consider agritainment in the rural residential districts as a general use. I could see debating what zone this particular property is in.
And we'll
So
do that.
that's just
and
where that's just my take on it. And I guess.
And
we
I
talk
think
more.
our aim is to do that, have that discussion next week.
Mhm. Okay, I have a
Mr.
better
Yeah.
understanding of that now then.
Thank you. Mr. Yocum, just a second. Any other planning commission members have a comment on this? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Yocum. Go ahead.
Just one thing to add, well, several things to add without taking too much time, because I know we have a big workshop. But I did talk to Galen Dravelbis. He owns a 2-acre piece up along 322. I think he sent you an email, Amy, saying adjacent to his farm that is not on that farm, that would be in the rural residential. He said he wishes that would stay agricultural, as Hunt Ridge Manor Homeowners Association has 17 acres just to the east of the Nittany farm. So everything from 322 to the edge of Hunt Ridge Manor, very, very close to 45, 48 acres. I didn't add it up, but somewhere around those numbers would be staying ag. So it isn't just my 17-acre piece. It'd be the whole thing from the Dravelbis farm east to the Elks Club and along 322. Just want to give Mr. Baker an
Yeah, so I
idea
guess
of where that land was.
could we for the workshop, could we get kind of a blow up map of that area then?
Yes,
If
we're
you
gonna
look
do
at,
that.
hey, Amy,
Yeah.
isn't it seen on the bicycle map right below Huntridge Manor that we're all looking at?
The official map.
Yeah,
It's right, it's everything that's below Huntridge Manor is what we're talking about.
Yeah, we'll have a map for you at the work session. Mark's working on putting together a PowerPoint presentation. So we'll have more depth so you can see and understand, and we'll make sure that all of that is projected so you can see what we're talking about.
Mr. Immel or Mr. Hanlon, any comments that you have before we move on?
Yeah, let me just mention one thing. I live in Hunt Ridge Manor, but I'm also past president of the HOA, and they appointed me to sort of keep an eye on this. From what we're asking, we know that the residential lots can be rezoned. That's not an issue, but that 17.48 acre retention area, which is never going to be developed along 322, nor is it ever going to have sewer and water. We're asking that it just stay as agricultural. We're already in clean and green, and we think it's logical right along there to keep that piece of land under agricultural.
Thank you. That's good to know. Mr. Immel?
Nothing. I'm just, thank you for letting me listen in here tonight. I'm just curious the thoughts of the planning commission and seeing where this goes as a potential buyer. So obviously I have a vested interest in it. So thank you for just
Right.
letting me listen in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is helpful to set the stage for next week's meeting. Hope as many of you on the Planning Commission as possible can attend that, because we all bring different views to these sometimes complex issues, and everyone's viewpoint will be helpful. That's 7:30 on Wednesday, right, Amy?
Yep, 7:30. I'll send out, we're aiming to have the agenda and everything done Friday. So I'll send out the link for everyone to sign up for that meeting. We'll set it up as a webinar again. That we find that's a little bit easier when we have a bunch of people. But I'll send everything Friday to everybody, including Mr. Yoakum, Mr. Immel, Harvey, and also I believe Mr. Yoakum's attorney might want to come as well. And John Tate wants to come. So yes, I'll make sure that everybody gets the login information.
Great, good. Okay, anything else on this before we move on to what is now our agenda item B, Planning Commission Business Point B, potential amendments to the sewage management program. Gentlemen, no need for you to stay on. You can certainly, this is lively, really fascinating, interesting stuff that we're going to be talking about. So if you have nothing better to do, you're welcome to stay. But if you sign off, we will certainly understand.
I'll pass.
That's a
Okay,
good call.
there we go. Who's gonna lead us through this, Amy?
That would be Mr. Mark, I believe.
Yes, I will be walking you through this issue. So back in January, the Planning Commission had looked at a request for a sewage planning waiver for the Bickle subdivision off of 45. And if you recall, at that time, we discussed a little bit about how the township has historically not been supportive of sewage planning waivers whenever a land development plan is submitted. The township has required both a primary and secondary absorption area for all properties that are involved. But in this particular case, the property owner was requesting a waiver to either plan for the proposed lot or the lot that was going to retain the home that the older farmhouse that was on the property already. So that went forward to the board at their February meeting, at which time they did approve the waiver request. I believe it was a vote of 3-2. And there was a little bit of discussion about it. Following the approval of the waiver request, we spoke with DEP about it just to kind of clarify that it was going to be coming their way, make them aware of the issue. And at that point, they had told us they thought you may want to check with your solicitor to make sure you didn't violate your sewage management program, because the Center Region municipalities back in the mid 2000s or so updated all of their sewage management programs, which require primary and secondary sewer areas for everything, and really don't have any criteria for waivers or even the option to get a waiver. But the solicitor did feel that our ordinance could be interpreted in a way that would allow for the waiver to be approved. So what happened though is the solicitor also recommended that the township consider incorporating criteria for waivers moving forward as a means of, I think, providing more of a legal basis should we ever receive a challenge to approving one of these. So listed in your agenda are a couple examples of uses that the DEP form specifically identifies as acceptable. So there's some in there that are large lot, and then some smaller parcels that I think make a lot of sense. Basically, you're looking at things that, at least at the time that the land development or subdivision plan is being considered, there's no expectation that a cell phone tower is going to generate any sewage. So why would we require planning for something like that? And then they also have a list of unacceptable uses, and those are generally, I think, consistent with kind of common sense here, is that the waiver is never meant to be something that is used just to basically get away with not doing sewage planning at this point and somehow kicking the can down the road. So it's important to understand, though, that even though these waiver requests exist, municipalities they're never obligated to consider them. This is something that, from my understanding, the Department of Environmental Protection kind of created as a means to provide some relief in very rare and unique circumstances. So ultimately, we can't be more liberal than what the DEP kind of defines in their form, but we can certainly be more strict if the township is interested in doing so. So I think from a staff's perspective, we certainly see that, if we were to create these criteria, including things like water towers, cell phone towers, sewage pump stations, stormwater facilities, those types of things are pretty reasonable to never expect there to be any sewage generated from them. And kind of similar to the Bickle property, I don't know that, even though I think staff would have preferred that both parcels would have had sewage planning conducted for them. If the one lot that was just going to be strictly agricultural had been waived, I think that'd have been one thing, but there was an existing home on the other property. And I think from a staff's perspective, we think anytime there's an existing home or dwelling or any type of structure that generates sewage, there should be replacement area testing done for that if there's a subdivision proposed, just to ensure that there's no chance that a future septic system failure will result in the township having a liability that they have to kind of be the ones to figure out how to solve. So that's kind of an overview of what we're looking at here. And our recommendation this evening is that we'd like to hear back from the Planning Commission on your feeling on these waivers, and if you believe we should be including criteria, and if so, what those criteria should be.
I have something to this. I don't think that there should be a waiver. I mean, if you were going to take the Bickle farm, and I think you're going to find this in a lot of places, if you go to the Bickle farm, there's the old original white house, which Leroy Bickle, his wife lives in. They subdivided, and Leroy Jr. has a house on that property. Ed Bickle, his brother, has a house on that property. Ed Bickle's son has a house on that property. And then they subdivided it off again, and they have a piece of property, I believe, that Leroy's daughter lives on. So on a 220-acre parcel, it's already been subdivided 5 times. And there's 5 lots on that original acreage. And I don't think that's unusual. When people own farms, that they subdivide off property and give it to their kids. And if we are interested in making sure that they do have the ability to have a second septic field, then I don't think we should allow waivers to happen.
So I would tend to agree with that for the situation described, that if we do allow waivers, that they not be allowed for that particular situation, which I think is kind of consistent under this unacceptable use that where there's maybe some existing properties that already have sewage on them, so they should have some type of planning for them. So I think that could be, in our particular case, an example of where we would not grant a waiver. And maybe we would, and if we would have had that in our ordinance, we would not have granted it. But I'm okay with granting waivers for a lot of these things in these first 2 bullet points.
Can we clarify that when you say 2, you mean the large parcel and the small parcel under acceptable
Right.
use
I'm sorry,
examples?
yeah, the large parcel, agriculture, silviculture, mineral lease, that type of stuff. Small parcel, water towers, pump stations, cell towers. Where it's clearly going to be a property that is not likely to have, any use of sewage for the certain indefinite future, that I would be okay with granting in those cases. But I think, yeah, if we were a little clearer, I don't think we would have granted it for this one, which we weren't recommending that it would be granted.
Mm.
So I do agree that we should probably, make these revisions so that it's a little clearer when we're willing to grant waivers.
Just for historical background, how did these 4 or 5, I'll call them subdivisions, but building houses on that one part of the Bickle property happen? Did they really not actually get sold and subdivided, and that's how they skirted around sewage planning, or did they have sewage planning? I'm confused about what happened with those 4 or 5 that Jeff described.
I think they all have septic, except for probably the only one that may be suspect. And you have to remember, a couple of these houses were built a good bit ago.
Yeah.
The original farmhouse, I would be surprised if they could find their septic field.
Right.
Just like any of the old houses, but I don't know at the time that any of those houses, except for maybe Leroy's son, would have had the required amount of 2 septic fields with a distance from the well that we require now. And I just don't find it to be, I mean, Todd probably knows, what is it, $1,500 to do a perk test?
I have no idea what a perk test costs, but
you dig 4 holes and you fill them for water and you wait for them to perk at the right amount, and somebody has to come out, one of the sewer authorities, and check about it. That's basically all it is.
The sewage enforcement officer has to go out and observe the test. If you don't own a backhoe or have the ability to dig the holes and provide the water, you have to hire somebody to do that. So there are costs associated with that. I can tell you that the houses or the lots that were created for both Leroy Senior's son and Ed's son were subjects of subdivision plans. They were both done since I've been here. I don't think the lot that Leroy Senior's daughter lives in was subdivided since I've been here. So that was 30 years ago or more probably. I know that all the township regulations regarding everything, including sewage planning and isolation distance from wells, were done with the 2 lots for the 2 sons. But prior to 1994, I can't speak to how it was done.
Right. To me, the sticky point with the DEP language is under that first acceptable use example under large parcel is, estates where no building or development is proposed. Well, that's fine for now, but as the staff point out, what about down through the future? So a related question is that, the paragraph after that in our agenda, there's mention that if a waiver is approved, it's impossible to ensure that township staff will recall that the sewage planning was waived. Well, can there be is there a simple way or an effective way to flag a piece of property that has, I know we talked about this briefly last month, but a flagging system that then alerts you to, hey, this never happened. And we, can we keep that attention on that waiver in a simple way is a question I have.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for saying it would be totally ineffective. I think one of the challenges is the passage of time, that you're going to have somebody even recognizing that we have a book or something somewhere, or a file that's keeping track of all of these things. And I think a good example is we were looking recently at a property out along Mountain Road that has a couple of absorption areas for an adjacent parcel on it. And we caught that in our plan review. This is not a plan that came before the Planning Commission, by the way. It was a minor plan, but nonetheless, found out that some of the adjacent parcels, septic fields, were on this property, but apparently one of those properties to the south up the hill has a non-building declaration on it that was done back in the 1990s. I don't think Todd was aware of it. I know I certainly wasn't aware of it. So it's just one of those things where it's just hard to even know that something's going to necessarily have that on there. They're not always easy to catch. And even having some type of a file or something to make sure people know that that's the property involved, it's just hard to ensure, I think.
Okay, that's helpful.
So in a sense, you're protecting future buyers by having the perk test done so that they know what they're buying.
Yeah. Mhm.
I would say you're not only protecting the future buyers, you're also protecting the Harris Township's municipal government, because what we discovered in talking to DEP after the fact here, and Mark, correct me if I'm misremembering this, if there's a violation of the sewage regulations following a waiver, the township is, in a lot of ways, legally responsible for making sure it gets addressed. There are probably sundry ways to pass that off onto the property owners, but it sort of creates another level of liability in my mind when we do waive planning, when we don't have to, and when a particularly good reason for doing it hasn't been presented.
I think the way that was worded is, you're correct. It did push it off to say that if there's basically any type of violation in the future, the township is responsible for resolving. Now, that's, I think, the case with any place we have a sewage violation. But when I was talking to the DP officials about it, I said, what level of responsibility does the township have in terms of financial burden? And of course, the answer was, you probably need to speak to a solicitor about that. So that probably indicates the fact that there could be some problematic issues with waiving sewage planning, and then there being a problem down the road that the township would be required to pay for in some way.
So back to this, Amy, is what the supervisors are looking for is for us to change this part of zoning to have a block of acceptable waivers and a block of unacceptable waivers.
We thought, because the supervisors were I wouldn't say they were confused, but they didn't totally, I don't know. I think they thought it was okay to give the waiver. They didn't understand sort of what they were punting away by granting the waiver. So after talking to DEP, when DEP said you might want to check with your solicitor, and Pat said, our solicitor, you should really come up with some criteria to make this easier and more defensible, right? So if something comes up and it comes up in a court of law. So I think what we want to discuss is, and I mean, I think we're hearing, at least Bob agreed with this. I don't know how the rest of you, or Kent agreed with this. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but that the acceptable use examples that Mark gave in the agenda item, those large parcel, small parcel examples, those are a good way to start as criteria. And then, we can maybe flesh out some other things, but then this would go back to the board and we would say, like, we would like to put this in an ordinance where we say, this is when we consider these waiver requests. And that way, it's immortalized. Like, then we know what we know, and it's not left to just, the elected officials to decide if they should do it or if they shouldn't do it. And then putting burden on staff that may be here 20 years from now to remember that a property didn't have to go through sewage facilities planning. So.
And so I'm clear on what
what
I
Amy,
was just going to go ahead, Ken.
yeah. So if we were to allow a waiver, and I know that, the Vickle one had there was a note tucked away down somewhere near the bottom of the plan saying that. But if we were going to grant a waiver, if it was conditioned upon a note being put pretty prominent location on the plan, don't normally, when somebody comes in to get a building permit, they have to bring in their subdivision, and then it would be pretty obvious to everyone, or maybe more obvious to a buyer. I mean, they look at the subdivision plan.
No, nobody has to bring in a subdivision plan whenever they apply for a zoning or building permit. Basically, they have to provide a drawing of their property and showing what it is they propose to build, and demonstrating that they meet the zoning requirements that are in effect that apply to the structure or structures they propose to build. It is entirely upon staff to remember that a subdivision occurred on this property, or research, every subdivision that's been done on a property. I'll be honest with you, I've been doing this for 30 years, and there are some properties that may have had 10 or 15 subdivisions throughout history. And for me to have to go back and look through every subdivision file, most of which are in upstairs in literally cold storage, or the subdivision plans don't even exist anymore due to misfiling or throwing them out or being destroyed in a fire in the 80s, our records are never really that complete. So it's a situation where it's going to be hit and miss, just like Mark described earlier. Whenever we're reviewing subdivision plans, it's hit and miss. If somebody remembers it or stumbles upon the information, we're going to find it, and if they don't, we're not.
So what you're saying is, if 15 years from now, somebody comes in and wants to put a cabin on that piece of Bickle property that was just subdivided, they wouldn't have to show you the subdivision plan to get that permit?
Well, first of all, I hope to God I'm not here in 15 years.
Yeah.
Second of all, no.
You
it
would catch,
have-
well, you would catch it, but I'm just talking about the future.
No, I probably wouldn't catch it now because I feel like I'm ready to retire, but you're not required to show a subdivision plan when you apply for a zoning permit. You just have to show your property and show that what you're proposing to build is in compliance with the zoning regulations. Now, most of the time, granted, particularly with subdivisions that have occurred since I've been here, I know that there are different setbacks and there are different requirements for different subdivisions, and I have most of them memorized, although I don't always remember them. But again, it goes back to staff either being aware that there's something to look at or remembering what it is that is special about that particular property.
And I think this committee has talked about putting notes here and there, and that is quite a burden for staff, especially since obviously there's no system for tracking any of that. And so I think it's really being responsible to add language that helps clarify and makes transparent what this group wants for this community. And I think that not only should we consider adding the first two bullet points, the acceptable uses, but I think we need to consider what's unacceptable so that it is clear. And I don't know that we need to get into the weeds about what that is, but I think we do want to consider unacceptable things that shouldn't be considered.
And I would add to the conversation that somebody's brought this up in a previous conversation. It's my experience that real estate professionals don't always know as much as we do about what's going on in our municipality. So they either don't know to look for subdivision plans themselves, or if they do, they don't oftentimes pass that information on, because our experience is that most of the time, whenever we're describing the history of a property or what might be required on a property to a potential buyer or somebody who's already bought the property, most of the time it's new news to them. They saw none of that throughout the buying process.
So to continue the point here, and I think move toward next steps, we do have from the DEP language some acceptable and unacceptable reasons for waivers, and then staff has recommended a little bit of more focus, if you will, on parcels that have an existing structure, namely a home. So I think between those two, we're at a place where we could recommend the situations under which a waiver might be considered. Do we need to talk more about those specifics at another meeting? Is this something that we want to put in more draft writing form? Amy, what do you feel is next step here for us?
I think we should sit down and put some draft language together for you, and then we can talk some more about this again next month at length.
I always like it when you guys put together the list that is that you can't do. So there's no doubt. And because we never know what the can do is going to be. We never knew cell towers were going to ever show up, but you know what I mean? So just make the list of things that we really don't want you to be doing.
Right.
Mhm.
We can do that for next month.
That's really super helpful. Okay,
Just-
we could, go ahead, George.
Sorry, yeah. But if you could just help a lay guy here with answering a question as to why this whole thing isn't as simple as requiring these sewer tests be done anytime anyone walks in with a plan to build something in Harris Township.
Because some things don't need sewer.
No,
Well, I think as
I
well,
said
I don't,
build something.
I don't know under state law that you can require someone to prove that they have primary and secondary absorption areas on a property if the lot was subdivided after, I can't remember the date, but there's a date at which time the State Sewage Facilities Act was updated. And after that point, you're required to always do primary and secondary absorption areas. So I think, are you suggesting that they have had the testing done recently, or they have to come in proving they have a backup, even if it is from an existing subdivision plan elsewhere?
I was simply saying that if they're going to build something, they have to have the sewer tests done.
George, maybe I can clarify. Anytime I receive an application for a zoning permit for either a residential structure to be built or a non-residential structure that's a commercial or an institutional structure, something like that, something other than a storage shed or something like that, they have to provide me either with a sewer permit from University Area Joint Authority or an on-lot septic system permit from our sewage enforcement officer. What the difference is between that and what we're talking about with these waivers is we can't, like Mark said, we can't require that they provide at the zoning permit stage evidence of a backup system. If they wanted to, they could, but the state law requires that at the subdivision stage, sewage planning occurs then, so you can make sure that the lots can be created, because they obviously can't if they can't meet septic requirements. So that's why one's done in the subdivision stage, and the actual issuance of the permit for individual systems, documentation of that has to occur at the zoning stage.
Hey, Todd, so to clarify for me, if I have a really old farmhouse, we could take the Bickles place, and I wanted to subdivide a piece of property right next to that. I'm the owner. Do I have to, obviously I would have to have the 2 septic fields and the well field on the new lot. Do I have to redo the ones on my existing old farmhouse to prove
if what you were saying is someone is subdividing a lot off of a lot that has an existing house and existing septic system? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like in a lot of places that we see around here, basically all live at Linden Hall, go find that field. So do I have to go reprove where the old field is and then also give you a new spot for a new field on my old 1810 farmhouse?
Yes, the subdivision plan has to show for the new lot you're creating, the new vacant lot you're creating, you have to have 2 acceptable sites. For the lot that's going to remain with the existing house on it, if there is a septic system, you have to show where it is on the plan, and you also have to show that you have a backup area in case that primary area fails. Our point in this particular waiver request was that was the condition that existed. There was an existing house on the property that was being subdivided, and we were told that there was an existing septic system on the lot, and we have no reason to doubt that. We were also told at the board meeting that replacement area had been located, I think, and relocated 3 times in history, something like that. So that was the point, our point, that the waiver shouldn't have been granted then, because the exact scenario you're describing where septic planning is required was proposed with the Bickle plan.
I'm done.
Any other comments on this sewage waiver matter before we take it up again next month? As in most things we start to unpack, it's a little more complex and nuanced than at first glance. Okay, hearing no other comments, before we move on to the update on the official map point, John Tate, I see you here. You may have been interested in the agenda item that we around the proposed ordinance for rural zoning. And we actually moved that to the top of the meeting, at the top of this meeting, and our other guests attended and then signed off. There is a work session with the Board of Supervisors next Wednesday, the 24th at 7:30, when we'll take up this topic specifically and talk about it.
All right, then. Well, I'll go watch hockey then. You can take me off.
Thanks, John.
Bye, John.
We'll see you next week.
Well, I got cleaned up and everything.
Well, it's not a bad thing.
And did you watch the end of the Penn State game? It was 3-3 when I came up. They were tied.
No,
Against
I'm
Wisconsin.
gonna watch the Penguins.
Oh, okay.
Enjoy.
So how do I just leave the theater here, or how do I get?
You just click leave.
Mute
And
button.
We'll bid
I-
adieu to you. Just click leave.
I'm looking for the leave button.
Bottom right corner,
Red.
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 Yeah. Okay.
Find
Maybe if
it.
I do this. Ah, now I the full
I'm an
screen.
expert.
on.
I'm an expert at the leave button.
Well, apparently I've become an expert too. We'll see you later. Thank you for your work.
Okay.
Bye, John.
Thanks, John. All righty, so update to the official map. Amy, Mark, you want to walk us through this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mark's
I'll-
gonna do that.
Yep, so your 2021 work program includes an update to the official map. And what we wanted to do this evening is provide you with just a brief PowerPoint presentation that gives an overview of what an official map is and how it works. I know that we have an official map currently here in the township, but I know it's not something that is brought up regularly to the Planning Commission. So we wanted to kind of familiarize you with what official maps are and how we can use them. And that way it'll hopefully help you out as we go through this process of updating it. So let me go ahead and, Amy, you will need to allow me to share my screen.
Oh, Lord, Mark, you're so needy.
I should have asked you in advance because this happened at the board meeting too the other night.
Are you okay to
asked
share
in
your,
advance.
are you allowed to share it now?
I am. Yep. Here we go. All right. Thank you. And hopefully the internet at my house will last through this. I was getting instability messages, so hopefully it holds on. All right. Is everybody can see that okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So first off, we'll talk a little bit about what an official map is. An official map is permitted by Article 4 of the Municipalities Planning Code. So this is actually has an entire chapter of the Municipalities Planning Code devoted to it. And what it does is it shows the locations of planned future public lands and facilities, such as things like streets, trails, parks, and open space. It also declares, by putting these on the map, what it does, it basically declares to the public that, hey, the municipality is interested in developing this on this private property at some point in the future. And then that then in turn kind of informs these property owners and possible developers of the land that the municipality has a goal of doing something on the property, so they can take that into account when they do their planning for development on the parcel. So an official map, just to be clear, is not a street map or a zoning map. A lot of people seem to think an official map is just, here's all of our roads, and we get phone calls every once in a while asking for the official map, and then you realize they just want a street map. It's also important to note it's not a wish list. The official map should only show facilities that the municipality is sincerely interested in developing, and that they're willing to put some type of financial basis behind. And contents of an official map should really be based on municipal planning. And that's just an important distinction. I think there's a lot of official maps out there that have been created that are probably just in a wish list format, and they're far less successful in being utilized. And another important thing to understand is that an official map is not a form of eminent domain. It doesn't give the township the authority to go ahead and acquire this private property that they might want for a facility without the owner's consent. It doesn't mean that if we show a road somewhere, we can just go take it later, whether or not the owner's okay with it. And I thought that was a fun picture of eminent domain. It's the first one that came up, the giant hand coming just to take someone's house. So anyway. So what are some official map benefits? Why would we want to have one of these? Well, it can help us to focus our financial resources on projects that would help advance the township's goals. It helps the public and private goals kind of mesh together. Property owners want to develop their property. The public has needs. We're making them aware, and then they can plan accordingly. It can help implement our comprehensive plan as well as any other adopted plans we might have. It can be used to basically provide any type of necessary public facilities that the township is typically in the business of providing, things like roads and shared use paths and sidewalks, as well as parks and rec facilities. Some municipalities utilize the official map to identify and preserve floodplains and other types of like riparian buffers, stormwater management areas, and historic sites, basically identifying where they want to obtain conservation easements. And another good thing about having an official map is that if you show facilities on your official map, and your official map is actually something that is adopted by ordinance, like a zoning map, you can use that then to apply for grants and things, because it's something you've done by ordinance through a process that you've made it aware to the public, and that can open up the opportunities for the township. So how does the official map work in terms of how we use it? Basically, it acts as a right of first refusal for the township to acquire private property for public use. So whenever we have a plan come into the township, the municipality, any municipality in the state, basically needs to either approve or deny that development plan within 90 days, unless we're given an extension, which happens whenever we have plans that are incomplete or inadequate. But nonetheless, we have a 90-day time clock that we're working within. But if there is a facility shown on the official map on that property, the township can technically take up to a year to take action on that. And the reason being is it gives the township 1 year to basically try to acquire the land from the property owner. That can be acquired either through payment. Maybe it's something that can be negotiated where, hey, we want to put a road here, and they're like, we want to put in a road as well. So you just simply try to find an alignment that works for everyone. So that 1 year trigger happens either when they actually submit a land development plan. In some cases, a developer might give a letter to the township that says, hey, we intend to develop this in the near future, and that starts the time clock. A municipality as well can give up its rights under the official map at any time. If a plan were to come in and the township says, you know what, we wanted that facility, but we've changed our mind, we don't want to buy the land from you, we don't have to worry about that 1 year time clock. We can act on the plan whenever we want. So it is a useful tool as far as it's, I wouldn't call it a bargaining chip, but it does give the township time to acquire land if they haven't already had the chance to do so. And it also gives the property owner kind of a reasonable expectation that, hey, if I want to develop my property, the township might take up to a year to see if they can talk me into selling my land or giving it to them. And it just puts everybody on the same page, but it is definitely a good tool for the township. So we do have an official map that was adopted in 2008, and you all received a copy of that. And this is the map that it's on your work program and proposed to be updated. So our existing official map only contains proposed roads, bikeways, and parks. I mentioned that other municipalities in the state have used it for other public purposes, but that's what our current official map shows. One of the reasons we think this needs to be updated is that we do have several properties that have already been developed, with some success in establishing facilities. I think the Rocky Farm, which is in the top left, that property, the road there, number 15 and number 19, are actually not too far from what was originally shown on the official map. I think the spirit of the map was met by what we ended up having in terms of development on the property. So now there's a connection from Aspen Heights out to 45, and there will be here with the next phase of Rocky Farm, which may be pretty close to completion, a connection over to Kaywood. And same with facility number 22, there's a shared use path that's going to be provided on the upper loop of the Rocky Farm when it's developed. So there's also, though, a number of facilities on here that are probably unlikely to be built using the official map. I think like number 27 in the lower left, that's a park that I think the property's already been developed. And when it came up, there was no interest in having more park space out there. We have Hessfield fairly close to that, just across the road. There's also the cost. Again, the township has to be able to pay for these things to be constructed or acquired. And then there's also the feasibility. So you have like number 25 there on the far right is a shared use type path going up Bullsburg Pike, which unless you're going to put it on the road, it would be very difficult without taking public property to extend it, off the road, existing road right of way. And if it's on the road, it doesn't really do us much good to be on the official map because we can acquire our own roads anytime we want. We don't need to rely on a one-year time clock. So that's the thing, is it's important to show facilities on an official map that would impact private property. So that's just something to keep in mind. So as I mentioned, this is something that was identified in your 2021 work program, and it definitely will require coordination between the Planning Commission, the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, and the Board of Supervisors. I'm going to be providing the same presentation to the Parks and Rec Committee here on Wednesday. And what we need to do is we need to work on identifying a process that will need to be used to update this map. And I threw in just some thoughts, things for the Planning Commission to think about. So what types of facilities does the township need and would be willing to acquire and develop? So what types of public facilities do we think we're going to need here in the next 10 to 20 years? What type of public goals should be conveyed via the official map? So what do we want the public to know that we're trying to provide more of in the township? And I think more importantly, what plans should be used for the basis of the map? It's really important, as I mentioned, that it's not just everybody gets a copy of the official map to take home and then you scribble on where you think roads might be cool. It's fun to do, but it's probably not very practical if we don't have some type of planning basis for why we want a road there or how that bike path is going to connect into some other facility that's important to the community. So I think understanding what plans we have, and do we have any planning gaps? Is there anything that we need to do from a planning perspective to make sure that the official map is updated in a meaningful way? So that concludes my presentation, and I will get out of the screen share mode, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
My first response, Mark, is I liked your bullet points there at the end in terms of helping shape our thinking and shaping our discussion. And I was hoping to see them in the notes, but I don't. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share that information with this group again, because I think it's really helpful in terms of guiding us.
I can send that out. I didn't finish it till today. That's why it wasn't in your agenda packet, but I will send out a copy of my presentation to all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. I think that's a great point, and will help us keep focused.
And your presentation was brief and on point, and I really appreciate the point, especially about a wish list. That it's not just let's throw everything on there and see what sticks.
Yeah, And I feel like the last time we did, well, the first time we did the official map in 2008, it was treated almost like a wish list. So that's why we want to have more of a coordinated effort with this time. And also, we've mentioned this before, we want to kind of tie this to, at least if the supervisors agree, tie this to that special project money that we're collecting, the dedicated millage, so that we could then say to residents, hey, we have this official map, we have these things prioritized, we're going to use some of that money to make that happen. So that's an excellent point.
On the official map, there's all the proposed roads and paths and parks have numbers on them. Is there a separate sheet that has is there like a name for all these things?
We have a key, yes, somewhere.
Okay.
We need to dig that out, don't we, Mark?
I can find it. I saw it many years ago. I will find it again.
Okay. I mean, I'm assuming as part of what we're doing here, we will probably go through that list and X out a whole bunch of them
Yes.
because they're either developed or they ain't never going to happen. So
I also wonder if the items, the numbered items on the list here have been vetted. Like, I see some roads here that I wonder if the property owners actually know about these plans.
We did do open houses when we did the official map the last time. They were at the fire hall. And we adjusted some of the lines based on concerns from property owners. And we told them, like, the intent is we just show the road on the map. It's not necessarily to put it in the middle of your property, but we did hear from a couple of property owners and made some adjustments. And there will be, and this was one of the things the supervisors I think are concerned about, but I think there's a way through it, but there will be a public component to this. We will have open houses. We may use the parking area of the new maintenance facility for one of them. We may do a virtual one to kind of capture everybody, but there will be a public involvement.
So the process, to clarify here, Amy, the process is that you're providing an update strategy that we'll look at in another meeting.
Yeah.
If you could confirm that, that would be helpful. And I'm also, it was mentioned previously that we would do something in conjunction with Parks and Recreation Committee members.
Yes.
Maybe you could walk us through what you would foresee as maybe just a loose timetable and some of the steps that staff will do to get us there.
Well, Mark is going to the Parks and Rec Committee meeting on Wednesday, so he'll present this to them at that meeting. I would like to see if we couldn't maybe have a joint meeting with you guys in the Parks and Rec Committee, like in June timeframe. The Parks and Rec Committee is in the middle of doing their parks tour starting in April, so they'll be a little busy. But see if we can't get that scheduled maybe June timeframe. And the regulations keep changing again from the governor to the good. So perhaps that could even be an in-person session at the fire hall, get all of you in one room and sort of talk. And then we would sit down with the Board of Supervisors as well. And then we would do some public open houses. So we're looking at a time frame like maybe having this ready to go fall timeframe. Just the rural zoning thing is, I think, occupying a little bit more of our brain space right now than we thought it would be at this point. So we want to get that kind of shepherded through. And then as far as the strategy, I think that's something that Mark, Todd, and I need to discuss after we do the meeting with the Parks and Rec Committee this week and figure out, exactly how we want to tackle updating this. I know one of the members in the Parks and Rec Committee, the Parks Committee has a parks plan, and they're in the process of updating the parks plan, which the board will then adopt next month. And one of the members was like, maybe we should wait to do the parks plan and make sure it's jiving with the official map. So there's some disconnect there that we need to explain. And then explain why things stay on, why things don't stay on, that kind of thing, get everybody on the same page, because there's been a lot of turnover on that committee since we did this the last time.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments or questions on this official map? It's kind of too bad it has the name of official map, which would be called a planning map or something, official planning map maybe, but that's not our term. I recognize that. Anyone else have comments on this? let me just say that, you know, I have spoken to commission members and almost without exception, everyone's kind of excited about this, this part of our work plan because it's a little different than the things we typically get involved with. So thank you for introducing it to us this evening, and we look forward to working on it over the next half year plus. Move on, please, then to items for the agenda for April.
We're gonna hopefully bring the R1 zoning district stuff back around that we didn't have time for this month. And then the sewage facilities waiver, we'll try to have some language ready for that. And then Todd, do we have any plans?
As is always the case, there's a possibility that you might have a couple of land development plans or subdivision plans on your agenda. One in particular, we're hoping will round into form enough to allow it to be on the agenda, and that would be Kaywood North Estate Slots preliminary subdivision plan. So they really anticipated being on last month's agenda, but there were too many comments and too many outstanding items to place it on the agenda.
And it's possible that the rural zoning, ag and rural residential will circle back around depending on the work session next week.
Sure.
Okay. I had mentioned the possibility, and I really just a possibility, if we get great weather in the third Monday in April, it's daylight savings. It'll be light till 8 or 8:30. Let's just like to plant the seed of the possibility of meeting maybe outdoors in person that month. If you know, we can certainly have enough light to do that coming May. As Amy mentioned, official limitations from the governor are being loosened, but would people, again, a lot of ifs there, but if it's a great evening, good weather, might people be interested, quick show of hands, in meeting out of doors, say at a park facility, something like that? Okay. Anyone feel really uncomfortable with that? And it's fine to say so, by all means.
I got my second shot today. I'm good to go, baby.
All righty. There you go.
Chris,
okay.
I would offer that we've had a couple of conversations in-house and meetings that would require, say, a PowerPoint presentation or anything that has to be done electronically would probably not fare well if we tried to do it in person away from internet. Other than that, and particularly long agendas would probably not be good either, because it's still going to get dark at 8:15 or 8:30 in April. So we probably can't do a whole lot of work in the dark.
Yeah, no, understood. There are a lot of factors that would have to fall into place to make this even possible, but just it's helpful to know that people are open to the possibility if the factors align to make something like that even reasonable.
Couldn't we spread out at the fire company?
I would have to ask them. I don't know what they have going on right now and what they're allowing. I don't think they've been allowing a lot of outside groups to use the fire hall. I don't know if they've changed their stance on that.
How's the Wi-Fi there?
The Wi-Fi there is fine. The one thing that's been nice for you guys is that I record all of these meetings and upload them to the YouTube page. And then I send out the YouTube link to folks that are interested in looking at your past meetings. It's been nice. You're not on CNET, but these are all still recorded, and we would lose that ability once we start meeting in person again. Although I am going to look into some technology that might help us in the meeting room itself or where we have internet access.
Okay, so we will get the agenda. We'll talk about the agenda with staff. I will in advance. We'll get that out, and the likelihood of meeting outside is slim, but we'll keep that door kicked open a wee bit, and look forward to the time when that actually meeting back in the township office is routine. Let's move on to item 7, please. Reports on zoning permits, CRPC, and the CCMPO Technical Committee.
Yeah, I think we have several months of zoning permit reports available. I haven't done the last month yet, but if you give me a few days, if you're planning on coming in this week, I should be able to get the previous months done.
So those need to be go into the township office, check them over, and sign them.
Yep.
Please, commission members. Okay, Amy, do you want to report on CRPC, please?
Yes, thank you. And so the Center Region Planning Commission met on March 4th, and I just have a couple of highlights. Penn State reported having achieved a very high sustainability score, the highest that's possible. So there's sort of a national review apparently of universities, and Penn State did very well. We received a presentation that sort of flagged that while that might be true, this region is not very high in terms of sustainability literacy. And so as a result, there is a survey for the center region that I would encourage you to complete and participate in that survey. That link is found on your the summary from this meeting, which was sent to you on March 11. And so if you would circulate that in your circles, encourage people to complete it. This is one of the things they're aiming for, and to help people, or to help direct them on how to help people understand sustainability impacts and climate change. So this is something that we can help support and influence. Then we also learned that the State College Connector project, the next public meeting has been pushed to late August. So there's not much movement on that. And with that, that is the end of my report.
Thank you. A clarification on the survey, the literacy survey, that's open to any resident of the borough or the center region.
That's right. And they're trying to spread the word through postcards and other sources, media and the like, but it is also included in a lot of emails and things that they are sending out. For you, if you are looking for it, it's in that March 11th summary report.
Yep, great. Okay, thank you. George, did the technical committee meet? Do you have a report?
The technical committee met prior to our last meeting.
Right.
But on March 8th, I did participate in the safety subcommittee meeting that's been established through the MPO. And Center County is one of only 3 districts that have established this concept of a safety subcommittee review, along with Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And we had a meeting of a small group, mostly of PennDOT people, where we were given some presentations regarding physical and behavioral safety measures that are under study and under consideration as part of the new safety performance measures that the state is putting into place through PennDOT that will ultimately help determine TIP funding going forward. That was one of my reasons for being especially interested in being involved in this safety review. And we received some data regarding safety issues and intersection issues and segment issues that exist. And on the data needs more work, and they've gone back to the drawing board on culling it down for causality, because it was just raw data without any filters, let's put it that, use that terminology, which everyone in the room agreed we needed to put filters on there to account for work zone issues and things of that nature. And we'll be meeting again in the next, I'd say, 6 weeks or so, and probably for a period of 8 months or so. And I'll keep you updated on this particular subcommittee in addition to the technical committee itself. That's it.
Amy and George, thank you very much for representing the township on these, on the planning commission and the technical committee, and George, this extra safety subcommittee. It's great that we know that your eyes are on these matters, and you're representing us in those meetings. Thank you very much. Amy, you want to run down through point 8 and recent Board of Supervisors issues?
Sure. The board approved the following plans: the Rallis minor subdivision plan, the Rallis subdivision planning module, the Cummins minor subdivision plan, the Campbell Tract minor subdivision plan, and the Campbell Tract planning module. They did approve ordinance 343, amending the village zoning district regulations. If you remember, that started a year ago, so we're pretty happy to get that done. And they have scheduled a public hearing and possible adoption for the solar regulations for April 12th.
Hey, Amy,
Yes, sir.
just a question on the Rallis subdivision and stuff. That's all in the old, that's all along 45 basically, or up above 45 Mountain Road, that quadrant.
That's a Todd question.
Basically, it's a lot that actually was at the corner of Mountain Road and Misty Hill Drive. What they propose to do is sort of split it down the middle and create 2 separate lots. If you're on Misty Hill Drive, within the last year or two, Rallis put a new stone driveway on the one lot that was being created. He installed a pond up there also, so he has a little dock on the pond, and that's where it's at.
There's a little cabin.
Well, there used to be a little cabin. They didn't want to have to do sewage planning, so they removed the septic system and turned it back into a storage shed.
What is did the planning commission see these plans, or did they not get to planning commission level because of what they're proposing?
Yeah, they were minor plans, so the planning commission does not review minor subdivision.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
If you're looking at the official map, is that basically item 1 or trail 1 that's coming off of Mountain Road there?
Yeah, that's Misty Hill.
Right. So
Road 1, yeah.
was that a road? I'm colorblind. I can't see if that was a road or a bike path.
It's a road.
Yeah, it's
road.
basically the second one from the left is the general location that we're talking about.
Okay.
So if you go up there, I just drove up there. He's got a no trespassing sign on it, but I didn't care. And I drove up and it looks like a park. Have you been up there? He's got
it's been a while.
Landscaped and a pond, and it looks like a park now.
Yeah, I was up there, and what you just said previously sounds like a confession.
On that note.
And a recorded one.
Yes. On that note.
Are there
You're not going to put that on the YouTube video, are you, Amy?
It's being recorded right now.
It's already done. Forget it.
anything else on the recent Board of Supervisors actions to discuss or question? Thanks for clarifying that, Bob. I was wondering about the Rallis stuff myself, hearing the machinery there from my house over recent months. Okay, I think we've wrapped up the agenda. Anyone else have anything to say before we adjourn? Hear a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting, please.
I'll make the motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I'll second
Second.
it. Beechen.
All righty. Those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.